yeah, I am a professor of economics at San Diego State, and I'm also the director of our Center for Teaching and Learning. But as the director of the CTL, one of the challenges for me has been working with faculty across disciplines, in part because I love teaching because I love economics, right? And I really resonated with something Kim said yesterday about just being really passionate about economics. And I know we all are professors, but there was a definition of being a professor that I heard many years ago. And it really resonated with me because it's really how I feel about economics. That is, I think that if I can just get my students to think more like economists and to see the world the way that economists see it, it will actually make them better people, right? And collectively make this a better world. And so what I want to talk about today is really one of the big reasons why I feel this way, why I think that thinking like an economist can make our students better people. So we all are familiar with the many, many stereotypes that people have about economics. I think a couple people today and yesterday have already pointed out that if you ask people what is economics about, you're likely to get responses about money or finance. If somebody's taken an econ class before, they might say supply and demand or markets. And I keep meaning to survey economists and see how you all answer this, so maybe I'll do that when we're done today. But the way that I describe economics, the way I introduce it to my students on the first day of a principles course, is to emphasize that economics at its core is the study of human behavior. It's the study of choices and trade-offs, right? And in particular, it is a social science. This is a little easier to explain to my students at SDSU, where the econ department is actually in the College of Arts and Letters, and they always wonder why. Why isn't it in the business school? So I usually start with that. And as economists, we tend to sometimes get very wrapped up in the science part of our social science, right? We get wrapped up in the math and the equations and the graphs and all of that. But at its core, economics is a social science. It's about human behavior and how we interact and the choices that we make within a social context. And so, again, what I want to sort of focus on today is a way that we can help our students really get that, really understand economics, the social part of economics as a social science. So I'm going to start with a little thought experiment. You don't have to close your eyes, but you can if you want to. Maybe in these chairs you shouldn't. But I want you to imagine, end of the day, you're driving home, traffic is bad, you're on the freeway, tollway, if you're from the East Coast, I guess. And this, I'm kind of revealing myself as a Californian because if I were doing this, there would definitely be tons of traffic, right? So you're driving along, and in your mirrors, you see a car coming up, weaving through traffic, basically driving like a maniac, right? Going in between cars, clearly in a hurry to get somewhere. And traffic, tightens up, and so this person ends up right behind you. They're right on your tail, way too close. Maybe they're flashing their lights, honking, clearly want you to get out of their way, but because of traffic, you can't, okay? Everybody can put themselves in that position, right? How do you feel? What's your emotional response to that? How many people are super annoyed? All right, at least a few hands. Okay. Right? I think that most of us would be. I know I would be, right? It's just like you're already in traffic and now you have this idiot on your tail. So traffic lightens up a little bit. You're able to move over. As he speeds by you, you turn to look and maybe thinking you might flip him off or something like that. And you see in the back seat that there is a clearly pregnant woman, apparently in labor. How many people feel some shift in their emotional state? Okay, so you might go from being super annoyed to being, oh my God, right? Or at least and feel some sympathy and maybe be, even more eager to get out of this guy's way. So I tell this story to emphasize the importance of empathy. Okay? We typically define empathy as sort of putting ourselves into somebody else's shoes, seeing the world through somebody else's eyes, and understanding the world from their perspective. Okay? And one of the things I think is important to point out is that empathy is not about changing other people's behavior. It's about understanding that behavior, right? It is about changing our response to their behavior by thinking about why they're doing what they're doing, by seeing the world through their eyes. And research has shown that people who are more empathetic are happier people. They have better social interactions, and that people with less empathy are more likely to engage in negative social interactions like discrimination and bullying, right? So empathy is a good thing. It makes us, not just makes us, happier people, but it improves our relationships with other people. So although I don't want to argue with Mr. Einstein here, I would actually like to assert that economists are uniquely positioned to help our students develop empathy and to be more empathetic people. And I know that seems counterintuitive when we think about the stereotypes of economists as self-interested and very focused on our own interests. And yet that's exactly why I think that helping students think like economists can help them develop empathy. So if we think about the cost-benefit framework, and if we take that cost-benefit framework really seriously, I believe that it should make us more empathetic people. Economists presumably believe that people make rational choices by comparing costs and benefits, right? We weigh the costs and benefits of our decisions. If the benefits outweigh the costs, we do it. If the costs outweigh the benefits, we don't. And the way economists typically refer to that is rationality. Rational people weigh costs and benefits and make their decisions accordingly. So you can turn that around to analyze people's behavior and try to understand the decisions and the choices that people make by applying the same framework, right? If you see somebody do something, then it must be that they think the benefits of doing that outweigh the costs. And I know I don't want to get in arguments about this can get tautological, right? Because we can define benefits as anything that makes us more likely to do something, and costs as anything that makes us less likely to do something. But if we really do think about the world that way, it can really help us understand things that might be confusing to us otherwise. Decisions people make that we don't understand, we can get some understanding by trying to think through what costs and benefits are leading to that decision. And that understanding is the core of empathy, understanding why people do the things they do from their perspective. Okay? So economists are, again, well situated for this because we also understand the limitations of cost-benefit analysis. So we know that there are lots of things that complicate that weighing of costs and benefits, one of which is normative values. We know that even if you can measure costs and benefits in some objective way, different people can put different subjective value on those costs and benefits. So I buy a ticket for a concert, and the price is $100. But the value of that $100, the sacrifice that $100 represents, could be very different for two different people, right? On the other side, the benefit of going to that concert depends a lot on how much you like whoever is giving the concert. I can guarantee you that if I go to a cult concert with my husband, his value of that experience, even if we're both in the same room, the value he puts on that experience is many, many times mine, right? So we understand that even when we can sort of measure and identify costs and benefits in an objective way, the subjective value that different individuals put on those same costs and benefits can vary from individual to individual. Fortunately, economists are trained to think about the difference between positive and normative, and so we can help our students think about that difference as well. The other thing, or another thing that can complicate cost-benefit analysis is imperfect information, right? We don't always know with certainty what the costs and benefits of a particular decision might be. Maybe those costs and benefits aren't coming until later, and so there's some probability associated with the future benefits or the future costs. We also know that sometimes people don't think about or really are even aware of all the costs and benefits that might be associated with a particular choice. Again, economists are trained to think about unintended consequences and to think about all of the possible outcomes of a decision that other people might not think about. And so when we're talking to our students about choices and the trade-offs involved, we always point out to them that the consequences of an action can include things that might not be the intention of the person making the decision, right? So that's something we're trained to do and can help our students think about. So I believe that thinking about the world this way, if we use cost-benefit analysis to analyze decisions, it can really help us understand choices and decisions that might otherwise seem irrational, right, for us. And so the example I like to use is that, I spent a lot of time in the early and mid-2000s trying to make sense of some policy decisions made by the then administration that I could have just written off as irrational or evil. And so I really spent some time trying to think about, well, what weighing of costs and benefits would make that behavior rational? Maybe Bush really did believe that there are weapons of mass destruction, or maybe he perceived that the cost of allowing Saddam Hussein to remain in power was worth some of the actions that he took. I can't say that I convinced myself, but thinking about it that way helped me empathize and helped me see the behavior as something that could exist within that rational framework. That story example also highlights an important part of using cost-benefit analysis to develop empathy. And that is, we need to be careful not to make assumptions about which costs and benefits other people are valuing, right? So to go back to my road rage example, when we see other drivers driving recklessly and acting like idiots on the road, it's easy to assume something about their motivation. It's easy to assume that they just don't care about the costs that they are imposing on other drivers, right? And that they're valuing their own time way more than anything else, et cetera, et cetera. But then when we realize that person is just trying to get his pregnant wife to the hospital, or maybe they just found out that their child was in an accident and they're trying to get to the school to pick them up. When we think about the other potential weighings of costs and benefits that could explain this behavior, it can help us challenge our own assumptions and then therefore change the way that we respond to those individuals. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So what does this mean for teaching? There's one way in particular that I use this for teaching. I think that if we can emphasize the relationship, that's an old version, by the way, Andy. If we can emphasize using cost-benefit analysis to develop empathy, it can help our students actually understand cost-benefit analysis better. So there's an assignment that I give my students when I'm talking about cost-benefit analysis, where I ask them to identify or think about a time when somebody made a choice that they didn't agree with or that they didn't understand, and then to try to identify both the objective and the subjective costs and benefits that could have led to that decision and have it still be rational. That is, have it still be a result of that person believing that the benefits outweighed the costs. Right? And this gets at a lot of different concepts within that we try to get our students to understand at that principles level. They start to see costs don't have to be just those objective prices that you pay for things, but costs can include things given up, opportunity costs, right? It helps them think about the difference between normative and positive and subjective and objective. It helps them think about imperfect information and unintended consequences. Maybe they see that their friend's action has a consequence, but they now realize their friend didn't see it that way, right? And that also helps them implicitly kind of uncover whatever assumptions they might have been making about what was driving this person's behavior. Right? So it helps with all of those things, and the end result being that they understand cost-benefit a little bit better, but then you can also tie that into if they continue to do that, whenever they're faced with a choice by other people that they don't quite understand, analyzing it this way using cost-benefit analysis can help them understand and empathize with what that decision is. Another aspect of this that I think is beneficial for teaching is if we go back to those stereotypes that a lot of students have, again, emphasizing this connection between cost-benefit analysis and empathy can help dispel some of those conceptions that students walk into our classes with, believing that economics is only about self-interested behavior. Well, it is, right? I mean, we are implicitly assuming that people act in a self-interested way. They're maximizing their benefits relative to their costs. But we can use that in a way that promotes better social interaction. And that emphasis on the social interaction has, I think, a potentially bigger impact on students who are more likely to shy away from economics because of those preconceived notions about what our field really is. And that has the potential to attract and make economics more appealing to students who would otherwise be turned off by that stereotype that they have of what we do. And that includes a lot of women and underrepresented minorities who we know are more likely to shy away from our discipline in general. And then finally, I think that if we apply this ourselves, I'm making this argument not just that we should help our students think this way, but honestly, we all should. If we all really take this seriously, economists should be the most empathetic people on the planet, right? But in particular, being more empathetic as a human being makes you a better teacher. Earlier, someone was talking about, I think it was Selena, was talking about climate in the classroom. Empathizing with your students and understanding that your students face costs and benefits and weigh costs and benefits potentially very differently than you do. Again, this isn't about changing people's behavior, but about changing your response to that behavior. When students come to class late, don't come to class and fall asleep, right? There's a tendency, especially I think for younger faculty, to take it really personally. It must be that they think I'm boring. It must be that they just don't respect me or don't value what I'm trying to teach them. And that can impact how we respond to those students, right? When that's the way you are thinking, you're assuming that they are thinking, it changes how you then respond to them. If instead we can empathize with our students and think about the many other reasonings for their actions, right? Maybe they don't understand, maybe they do think you're boring. I don't know. But if a student is in your class and they're falling asleep, especially a morning class, right? Maybe it's that not that they necessarily stayed up all night partying, which I think is a common assumption at my institution, but maybe they were out working all night and they just got off their night shift. Or maybe they were up all night with a baby because they've got a family that you don't know about. Right? There are all kinds of possible explanations for our students' behavior that are very different than the assumptions we might make. And if we can adjust our thinking about that, or at least entertain those other options, it can really change our dynamic and the way that we relate to our students. Okay. So finally, just to bring this back to my opening point, I think that this is one way in which if we can get our students to think more like economists, to apply the cost-benefit framework to a broader range of their life, it not only can make them happier people, better people, and improve their social interactions, but collectively can make the world a better place. Thank you.